There we go. Okay. Hi everyone, and welcome to your Bully-Proof Life, my channel where I explore how we can all bully-proof our lives. So this is about how we conquer our inner and our outer bully by facing our biggest fears, and really how we turn those into our fuel for success. Now, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I wanted to really use this as an opportunity to zoom in on the importance of mental health. And, you know, for me, that sort of translates into how we conquer our inner bully, you know, those limiting beliefs, those fears, and then negative self-talk. And, you know, I've invited some amazing guests along to share with me their thoughts around how they stay healthy, and also, you know, give us some tips around, you know, how we can all look after ourselves, especially during these very scary and uncertain times. So I'm really delighted to welcome my first guest today, Rob May. Rob is the founder and managing director of IT and cybersecurity business Ramsack. And he started the business nearly 30 years ago. Yes, I know you don't look old enough, Rob. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. Rob's also an author, the ambassador for cybersecurity for the Institute of Directors, and an international keynote speaker. Rob's also a husband and a dad. And I know a very loved leader for his teams. So Rob, welcome today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And so I'm going to jump straight in to ask you to tell us a little bit more about Rob, the person.
Oh, wow. So I guess, I mean, we all use labels, don't we? And I guess the labels that you've just shared in terms of what are my functions would describe me on the one hand. On the other, I would say I'm very driven. Some would argue workaholic, and probably my own worst critic. I'm very, very self-critical, but very, very driven to succeed, and to but not to succeed at all costs, to succeed by doing the right things and by looking after people. And I think if you help people, whether that's staff or whether that's clients, then, you know, good comes of that.
Yeah. And I have to say, thank you so much for sharing that. I have to say, love the shirts. I know you put it on specially for me because, you know, I'm a big fan of flamingos. I do my sort of little flamingo dance on social media quite often, which shows when I'm really happy.
No, absolutely. And yes, my shirts are part of my personal brand, but it had to be a flamingo shirt today.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate that. So Rob, how do you believe that your mindset affects your life every day?
I think once you start to understand your brain, you start to understand what a huge enabler it can be, but also what a massive drain it can also be. And I think once you start to take that journey and realize, you know, I love the concept of filtering, and I love the concept that, you know, there's so much that our brain is processing all the time. The only way that our conscious brain can make any sense of it is by applying filters. Unfortunately, I think all too often we apply negative filters. And I think the awareness helps you reset that, you know, having that pattern interrupt, so that when you become aware that you are, you know, in a bad mood or looking at things negatively, that you quickly snap out of it and learn to focus differently.
And I think that's so important, right? I think in my own sort of journey, you know, and a lot of the work that I've done in the recent years, which is all around conquering my inner bully and improving my own mental health, it's really that idea of you are not your thoughts and you are not your feelings, and observing those thoughts and feelings, and as you say, catching yourself sooner. So what do you do to catch yourself, Rob?
Well, it's that. It's a good one. How do you catch yourself? I think it's interesting. The people that I work with and the people that I've worked with a long time. Obviously, one of the things is you get to know each other,
Mm-hmm.
and you get to know some of those signs. And I think part of a good team is that you have the vulnerability and the openness to say, actually, we're going to label that behavior, or we're going to point out that behavior. I think if you realize that you're not in a good mood, it's then it's then working out, well, what is it that puts you in a good mood?
Yeah.
I always say to people, I say to my daughter, it's impossible to be in a good mood and sing. Sorry, in a bad mood and sing. So
Yes.
when she's grumpy,
Mm.
I try and encourage her to sing and to change that, because I think it's very easy to switch the filter.
Yeah.
The great example, and I talk about this. I run a business school within Ramsack as well, and the way the brain works is one of the things I talk about. I love the chimp paradox, and I love that whole model. But when I talk about filtering, one of the examples I use is dating. And going back to the days when I was dating, you'd meet somebody, and this is the way that the brain works. So I would meet a girl and I would think, oh my goodness, she's amazing, she's the one, she's the future Mrs. May. And there's nothing, you couldn't tell me that there was anything wrong with her, because as far as I was concerned, she was perfect. And this happened quite a lot. And my friends might think, oh my goodness, what is he doing? And then, of course, over time, all the annoying things and all the odd behaviors start to outweigh the good things. And all of a sudden, you switch this filter from thinking, this is the most perfect person I've ever met, to the absolute opposite, in terms of the filter now is, oh my goodness, she's a psycho hose beast and I've got to get her out of my life. The thing is, all those things that you first liked about the person are still there, but you've just applied a different filter, and you don't see those anymore, you don't value them anymore.
Yes.
And I think being aware of that, and then how that plays out, in the workplace,
Yes.
it's really important to get a handle on that.
Yes. I was just going to say, you've just used a personal relationship as an example, but actually I've also seen and personally experienced how that plays out in the workplace as well, and I love what you've said about giving each other permission to call out those behaviors. And I think for leaders that are listening or watching the show, I think it's so important, especially now, to have some sort of communication channel and mechanism where your people are able to sort of say, you've just sent me an email, for example, it sounded a bit, you sounded a bit irritated, can I just check, what was going on? Or and I think it's sometimes quite hard to translate kind of meaning in words, in terms of written words, so especially during this time, I think, where we don't have the physical interaction with people, it's so even more important that we have those contracts with each other, so where we are allowed, we give each other permission to sort of call out when we're not certain about someone's mood and certain about how the person's feeling, or whether you're actually in a good place with each other, so I mean, the relationship aspect is probably even more important now than ever before. How are you sort of coping in this COVID environment, and particularly with your teams, Rob? Because I know you obviously run a very successful business. And how do you look after and help your staff with their mental health?
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the mistakes that I made at the beginning of lockdown. So if I'm having an internal meeting, whether that's a board meeting or a leadership team meeting or whatever, I always start it with a check-in.
Yep.
And the check-in is you score on a scale of 1 to 10 how you're feeling about the business at the moment. You score on a scale of 1 to 10 how you are personally.
Mm-hmm.
And then you share something that is on your mind. And I think it's important to do that because it helps the rest of the room see where you're at. And actually, if you've got the ability to do that and to have that vulnerability, I think if someone says, do you know what, this is what's on my mind at the moment, and it's a huge personal problem or whatever it is, then that completely changes the dynamic of the meeting. Or perhaps it makes other people far more tolerant. You know, if that person is snappy or short or whatever, that they get more tolerant. So that's in the pre-COVID world, that's what I would always do. And then I think when we first went into lockdown and we were doing far more meetings, our COVID response meetings and our strategy and our planning, and perhaps we were meeting on a daily basis as opposed to a weekly basis, those check-ins went out the window.
Yeah. Okay.
And actually quite early on, we had one meeting and it was not a comfortable meeting. And reflecting on it afterwards, because I knew there were two parties in the meeting that weren't in a good place, and that we hadn't tabled that. So that's important. So we've completely gone back to the check-in.
That's amazing.
And then it's really about encouraging people to make sure they're looking after themselves. Making sure it's very easy, isn't it, to just be at your computer all day long.
Yeah.
So we've had Pilates instructors do Pilates over Zoom for staff, and meditation sessions and lunch, just fun stuff as well, so that people are stopping and making sure that they're giving themselves some mental rest as well.
Yes, and I think it's recognizing that the self-care, as you say, but the compassion and the kindness you've mentioned earlier, that you are your own worst critic, and the reason why I invited you along on the show was when we spoke about the inner bully and how we really just naturally don't find it very easy to be kind to ourselves, and how that plays out, in terms of stress, and then in terms of, the sort of neural dissonance that happens. And then you're obviously going into that sort of chimp, that animal brain, which you've mentioned earlier. And then how that manifests in your relationships, and, suddenly you will shout at your children or your husband, and you kind of like, what the hell's just happened, kind of thing. So it is about that introspection, I think, at the end of the day, and making sure you look after number one. I think that's one of the biggest gifts that I got from my transformation coach, who was on the show last week, was that idea that you prioritize yourself first and foremost, because actually at the end of the day, if you don't show up as your best self, as a leader, as a mum, as a dad, as a wife, as a husband, as a partner, if you do, then everybody benefits as a result. So I think the self-care, the self-management piece, especially during these times. I mean, you and I said earlier, it's so easy now to just stay in front of your computer all day long, because you don't have the drive back home from the client, or the train journey back home after work, where you're actually breaking up that cycle now. And I actually read an article earlier this week where they're saying people on average are working 29 extra hours
Wow.
which I think is extraordinary. And obviously that's leading to burnout as well, you know. So people are being parents and teachers and workers. So I think it's acknowledging that it's an incredibly challenging time for everybody, and the more compassionate we can be, and as you say, can check in with each other and make sure we're all okay, the better. So Rob, I'm curious to know what's your sort of morning routine or evening routine, and sort of how do you kind of get yourself ready for the day and in the best possible shape?
Okay. And again, I think this has changed slightly since lockdown. I'm very much a morning person. Much to my wife's annoyance, I wake up and the minute my eyes open, I bounce out of bed like Tigger, and
you've got to give us some tips how to do that, because I'm trying to get into that habit, but I'm really struggling.
So I get up really early. I always have done, and I you know, I pre-corona I would get up early and I would go for a run. What's happening now, I do a daily video to the team, and I sort of gave myself my own target of making sure that everybody had got that video before 7 o'clock every day, so that when they start the day, they've got the sort of the reassurance or the motivation or the information from me. So my sort of morning run's gone out the window, and I now start with that video. But actually, that's been good as well, because I start with, you know, some reading and some reflection, and well, what's the positivity? What is it that I'm going to share with people to help motivate them today? And therefore, I've switched my run to the end of the day, because again, in the first part of lockdown, I realised that I was missing the switch off from leaving the office to driving home, and that decompression, so that when I walked through the door to meet the family, as it were, they got the best version of me, because I had already decompressed and processed everything that had gone on. And that stopped, obviously, during lockdown. So now I finish work and I go for a run at that point. And in fact, I do it with my son every evening, and that's become a really nice habit. And then I end every day with a gratitude journal. And we've always had this conversation with the kids anyway. You know, over dinner we always talk about the best things that have happened that day and what are you grateful for. But that's how I end my days. I journal, you know, 3 gratitudes every single day, and that's what I go to sleep thinking about. It's feeding your mind and focusing on the positive. And again, it's a filter thing, but you're forcing your brain to apply a positive gratitude filter.
And that's so powerful. I think, and it's that sort of rewiring of the brain. So the sort of because we all face challenges every day, right? So daily, many times there's a self-doubt, there's a limiting belief, there's a little voice like, can I do it, can I not do it, I'm scared. And it's then all about how we actually, as we said earlier, catch that, but then also replace that with that sort of different filter, that positive. I love the filter thing, because I think that really brings it to life, because it's sort of, you know, it's that sort of rose tinted glasses. And you were saying how you look through the rose tinted glasses when you meet someone the first time, right? But then, you know, the color just changes, and I think that's incredibly powerful. So I mean, it strikes me that you've always been a, you know, someone who's had incredible habits, you know. So if I look at you, I'm kind of looking at high performer. You know, you're healthy, you manage your energy, you show up as a leader every day. I just really look at you and I think, wow, you know. But it sounds like actually the first few weeks of COVID was equally challenging for you to navigate in terms of changing that routine up and allowing yourself the time to actually figure out a new routine and figure out a new way. And I think that's so important, because I think for myself, the first few weeks, I was literally like, you know, trying to figure things out. And then if you can't stick to certain routines, you actually beat yourself up about it. And that becomes a really negative thing, a really dangerous thing in itself. Would you say you've had that?
Yeah, I think all of us work
Yeah,
on routine
yeah,
and on habits, and so the challenge is forging new habits, isn't it?
yeah,
And new routines, and you know, the conversation I've had with some of my team is, look, we'll try it and see if it works, and if it
yeah,
doesn't work, especially having conversations around, you know, homeschooling and
yeah,
parents who are having to juggle this. It's, well,
mm,
you know, what works, and this might, and it might work for some and it might not work for others, but give it a
yeah,
go for a couple of days and see. And if that doesn't work, then let's look at structuring it differently.
yeah,
And you've just got to find something that works for you. And as soon as you
yeah,
do, and you start to settle into that
yeah,
new routine, then um then it's so much better, isn't it? You
yeah,
know, I think so many people reacted out of fear at the start of this,
yes,
and panic.
mm,
And actually you've just got to cut through that and get into, well, what is it really, and what's really happening, and what does it mean for
yeah.
your work life and your personal life and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that really strikes me is that if you're finding yourself, let's say you're having a difficult relationship at work, just as an example, it's not because of COVID that relationship's in trouble. It's probably been there before, but what's happened is the the situation has been magnified. And I think so. Um, being aware of that, and I'm very, very conscious that there will be lots of people, you know, that are still struggling to navigate this, and are still struggling to figure out a new routine, and are still struggling to embed new habits, you know, for some many reasons. You know, there are so many reasons why people you know, I know that you know, I've seen a friend post about depression the other day and saying, you know, this is actually a time where people with depression will have an extra hard time. So it's again, it's that magnification of whatever you are going through in your life. I think what I would say is to anybody, you know, watching this, is really just to reach out and to speak to someone if you're feeling like you are going through a tough time. I think the big thing is about finding the courage and the inner strength to ask for help. I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do, but you know, it's incredible how many incredible people are on the other side that's ready to lend that helping hand. You know, so so I just wanted to sort of just kind of paint, because I'm thinking, you know, people might look at us and say, oh, but it's easy for you because you've got all these habits and you've got it sorted, and I don't take this lightly, right?
No, absolutely. And I think it's vitally important. And again, in terms of the business, we'd say that it's you must feel free to talk about this. And it is harder. I mean, in the workplace, you know, pre-COVID, we've got mental health first aiders
Yeah,
that are trained to spot changes in behavior and mood, and
yeah,
to, you know, to have a cup of tea
yeah,
and a sit down and a talk. That's harder to spot when you've got this distributed workforce. But we you know, it's important to talk. And stress is a horrendous thing, and I don't underestimate stress for one moment. But I also think that quite a lot of people misdiagnose stress
mm-hmm.
and confuse being massively stretched with being stressed.
Yes,
And there is a difference.
yeah,
And I think if we can work out that you're stretched, then that's far easier to deal with, because we just look at, well, what do we need to take off your plate?
yes,
Um, so we have that conversation a lot. and then work out, well, okay, what else is going on, and what else do you need help with? Equally, not everybody wants to talk about that. You know, we do a lot of messaging at work around mental health and our approach to it, and we've had some people who have asked us not to send them that messaging.
Interesting.
Wow. And they're actually the people who need it, you know, is the reality, but they don't want to hear that. So I think you have to tread a careful line.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's so important. So, what advice has influenced you the most in your life, and why? That's such an unfair question, because I'm sure there are loads. But yeah, if you would have to pick one thing, what would it be?
I mean, in its simple form, it's you know, it would be just doing the right thing and treating people the way that you want to be treated, is extremely powerful. But one of my learnings on that, because we talk about, you know, treat others as you want to be treated, and obviously that's biblical in its roots. It doesn't apply to communication. And I think when you can understand somebody's communication style and preference, that's really important, because actually treating others as you want to be treated is applicable to kindness and respect. It's not applicable to communication. When it comes to communication, you've got to treat other people the way that they need to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, yeah, that's probably was a sort of an aha moment in my life.
I have just had an aha moment, because I think it's so incredibly powerful. I've had a conversation with a coach just before this call, and we talked about influence, and we talked about communication, and we actually talked about the ability to influence others is all about that person allowing you to influence them. They want to be influenced, and it's about people feeling understood, you know. So no, I think that's incredibly powerful. So wow, thank you, Rob. One book that you would recommend, and why?
A book. What book do I recommend? I find myself recommending a couple of books quite often, but for different reasons. So on a business front, it's E-Myth Revisited,
Right.
by Michael Gerber, and the E is entrepreneur. And I read that book long after I started my business, but I wish that I'd read it early on. And I recommend it to so many startups. You know, there's some absolute great learnings in that. So from a business point of view, that I've already talked about chimp paradox,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding how your brain works. And again, that's a fantastic book. Actually, I would say about 2/3 of that book, in my opinion, is a fantastic book.
Right.
I think it then gets pretty hard going for the last third. But I think if you can read that book, and if you can share that, and it's a labeling thing again, you know, it's labeling your chimp, your animal brain, your animal instincts, and we all have that animal brain in us, and you can't change its nature.
Yeah.
It is what it is. If your chimp is, you know, positive, or whether it's grumpy or argumentative or whatever, it's just what it is. It's what its nature is, and it's your human brain that changes that.
Yes.
But in the chimp paradox, he encourages you to name your chimp, and we did that in our family. So, and it's great with children actually, because you can then have a conversation in terms of, I know that wasn't you, I know that was your chimp, whatever your chimp is called. So that's a fantastic book too. To have that understanding, I think, is a great toolkit.
And I think you raised such an important point. How do we make all of this understanding that we get later in life about how the brain works and about behaviors and habits and psychology? How do we make that accessible to our children? So I would encourage, everybody with kids, watching to really think about how you can start introducing these conversations with your kids early on. Of course, we have a big thing in our house about kindness, because everybody, all the boys have kind of lived and breathed my experience, dealing with a toxic work relationship. So we talked about it a lot, and I think they're so aware of bullying, and the sort of the whole topic for them is just something that they so. And I think it's really going to help them navigate situations better. So I think that's incredibly important. And what legacy does Rob want to leave?
I mean, I love my job, and this is, I've been doing what I do now for nearly 30 years, as you said, since I was 6. But I love seeing people grow, and that was why I started the business school as well within the business, because it's how do you share this stuff. And the business school isn't teaching business, it's teaching these sort of lessons about understanding the brain and EQ and influence and all of those things that are really important life lessons, but will change you in your career. And I just, the legacy I want to leave is just people who I've worked with that I've managed to influence, and that when they look back and they join the dots, they say, do you know what, that happened because I did this with Rob. And that would be my my wish.
And I think you do that already. I can certainly vouch for that. I haven't even known you for very long, Rob. I think we were only introduced about 6 months ago, and the amount of times that you've reached out and you've connected me with someone, or you've given me an opportunity to join you for an event, or to put my name down to do a TED talk, whatever. I think for me, that's been, you live and breathe what you've just said. So I just want to also appreciate you for that, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
So so I think that's us for today. That's a wrap. Obviously, if you want to know more about Rob, I mean, where can people find you?
Ramsac.com, that's RAMSAC is the easiest place. Or if you want my TED talk, just search for TED and the Human Firewall.
Yeah, and that's one of the passions that Rob and I share, is around the people aspects of cybersecurity. So everything to do with the raising awareness, embedding skills, embedding secure behaviors in organizational cultures. I think I'm excited to see how we kind of go on this journey together. So there's so much work to do in this space as well, that it's now again more important than ever. It's cybersecurity is just in everything, and it's just going to become more and more important. So so if you like today's talk, please subscribe to my channel, Your Bully-Proof Life. I'm really excited about the next couple of speakers as well. We're all going to continue the theme of mental health. And so just wanted to leave you with one final quote today, which is, our only limitations are those that we set up in our own minds. And that was Napoleon Hill. So Rob, thank you again so much for joining me today. And I hope you enjoyed it, everyone. Take care now. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.